Hello and welcome back to the channel. In this video I'm going to be sharing with you a requested video of how to cut this asymmetric bustier or Victorian corset blouse. So if this is something you like, please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button. So let's dive right into today's video. So first, on my pattern, I've gone ahead to mark out all my basic measurements, which includes my shoulder to bust, shoulder to under bust, and my top length of 5 inches. So after that, I marked my shoulder divided by 2 and I added ½ inch because this pattern has a sleeve. So I went ahead to mark my basic neckline of 3 by 3 inches. After I'm done marking that, I'm just going to go ahead to mark my armhole area or chest line, which is your bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches. I'll measure what I have on the shoulder back and I'll go ahead to outline and draw a straight line. So after that point, I'm going to connect from my armhole down to my chest line this way. Now I'll divide what I have there into 2 by folding up my tape. I'll mark and come out by ½ inch. At the chest line, I'm going to go ahead to mark my bust circumference divided by 4 and I will mark and then go ahead to connect from that point to my armhole and to the upper part of my shoulder, and I'll go ahead to use my marker to outline this to make it more visible for you to see. So the next step I'm going to take is to mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2. My nipple to nipple is 7 inches divided by 2. I have 3.5 inches. So I'll go ahead and mark this all the way to my top length. So for this pattern, I'm actually using a bust dart. So after that, I'll go ahead to place my ruler and connect the dart or lines that I marked. So for the dart intake, I'll be using 1 inch on both sides. So for a plus size or someone that is a bit busty, you'll be using 1.5 inches. And after that, I'll just go ahead to connect my lines. So I'll place my curved rule, connect from the bust down to the under bust, and I'll be repeating this at the other side. So after I'm done doing this, I'll just go ahead to use my marker to outline this to make it more visible for you to see. So the next step after now is to go ahead to divide my shoulder into 2. So I'll place my tape, fold it, and I'll mark. So for this pattern, I'll be using a shoulder dart because of the asymmetric neckline, and I'll mark 2 inches. So let's say if you're on the bigger size, you can use 2 inches for your dart intake, or you can as well use 2.5 if you're on the bigger size. So whatever you marked, that is that 2 inches, you're going to replace it on the shoulder. Go ahead to place your curved rule and you're going to connect. So make sure that whatever you're going to reconnect won't be too much, so that you not have any excess at the armhole. Now you're going to blend in your pattern this way, and you notice that that 2 inches that you took out, by the time you connect it at the other side, it will replace it. So I'll go ahead and mark out the darts, and I'll just make a mark at that point to indicate that it is a dart. So I'll go ahead and mark my bust circumference divided by 4. So I'll go ahead and I'll mark 1.5 inches. I'll use this as a guide for the dart intake I'm going to take. So now I'll measure that dart intake, replace it, and add my sewing allowance. Going down to the under bust, I'm going to mark my under bust circumference divided by 4, measure the dart intake, and add my sewing allowance. So for the waistline, you're going to mark your waist circumference divided by 4, measure the dart intake, and add your sewing allowance. And go ahead to mark your hip circumference divided by 4, add the dart intake that you took out, and also mark your sewing allowance. So after that, you're going to go ahead to connect from the chest line to the bust, the under bust, from the waist to the hip point. So I'll just go ahead and to mark this out before we go ahead to alter this pattern. So now I'm going to come down by ½ inch from my chest line this way, and I'm going to also measure about 3 inches or 3.5 from the chest line point, and I'll go in by 2.2 inches. So from there, I'm going to connect this all the way to the chest line that's ½ inch we came down by the chest line. So I'm just going to go ahead to extend this to the other side. So now I'll go ahead to blend in these dots, and I will be extending it to the other side of my pattern this way. So this is the reason why I used a shoulder dart for this. It is actually easier to manipulate it when you're drawing out an asymmetric neckline like this. So I'll just go ahead and use my marker to mark this out, and this is what we have at this point. So I'll just connect from the armhole side, and I'll come down by 4 inches, go in by half, and I'll just draw out the design for the neckline. So this design on the neckline, you can go ahead to cut it out from your yoke, or you can just cut a fabric, top stitch it, and then use an applique or bead to hold it down, just like we have on the thumbnail. So also make sure that you blend in your shoulder so that it will be matching what you have because of the dart intake. So I'll come up by 2 inches here, and I'll go ahead to connect. So the waistline, the lower part of the dress we have in front is a bit roundish, so you want to also have that effect on your pattern. So now I'll be marking my bust dart of 1.5 inches, and I'll go ahead to connect. So you have to go ahead to measure this. So if you don't really know how to take your measurements, you can also check out my second YouTube channel, which is Maki's Closet. I have a tutorial on how to actually take your measurement for your bustier and corset pattern. So the distance from my front waistline and my back is 1.5, because we have a bust at the front part of your body, but at the back there's no bust. So that's why the front waistline is a bit longer than the waistline we have at the back of the body. So I'll just create another style line to fit what we have actually for this particular video, or what we have on the thumbnail. So this can actually serve as a Victorian corset also, or just a bustier that has a style line. So I'll just go ahead to cut out my pattern. So before cutting out my pattern for the neckline, you can just decide to cut it out on top, just like I said, or you can just place a fabric top stitch and then use an applique to cover it. That is actually easier if you're a beginner. You don't want to go ahead to start having issues while sewing it. So at this point, if you find this tutorial very interesting and educative, please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button, and also give this video a thumbs up. So while cutting out your pattern, please endeavor to close up your darts so that your pattern will be matching each other. And also go ahead to close up your bust darts also. And I'll just go ahead to cut out the rest of my pattern. So for the yoke of this dress, the easiest way, just like I said, is just to cut and paste this part. But if you don't want to do that, you can just go ahead and cut it separately. And for this yoke, you can decide to just use the placement method. There's a new method of attaching your yoke. That is, after you're done sewing your dress, you're just going to place it and hand stitch it, then use your applique to cover those parts. Most of the luxurious dress you see online these days is actually hand stitched, so you can hand stitch some part of your dress. But if you don't want that, you can just go ahead to attach your yoke just like you normally do before. But if you're a beginner and it's going to be difficult for you, just go ahead and use the placement method for this particular pattern or dress. So now we are going to go ahead to the back pattern of this dress. So I've gone ahead to mark out all the basic measurement just like I did for the front. The only difference is that my back measurement is slightly different from the front. So we used a bust dart. We took out 1.5 inches from the bust part. So my shoulder to waist in front is 17 minus 1.5, you'll be having 15.5. So my waist at the back is 15.5. So because of that 1.5 inches we took, the back length is now 20.5 inches and no longer 22, just like the front. So I'll go ahead to mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2, and I'll just go ahead to place my ruler, and I'm going to connect and draw a straight line at this point. So after I'm done doing that, I'll just go ahead to mark 1/2 inch, go ahead to repeat that at the lower part of my pattern, and I will connect. So after I'm done connecting, I'll go ahead to connect it to the upper part. After I'm done connecting, I'll just go ahead to mark my body circumference. I'll mark my bust circumference divided by 4 and add my sewing allowance. There's no dart there. Mark my waist circumference divided by 4, measure the dart intake, replace it and add my sewing allowance. Mark my hip circumference divided by 4, measure the dart intake, replace and add my sewing allowance. So all the measurements I'm taking starts after my zipper allowance. I'll go ahead and connect my pattern this way, and after I'm done connecting, I'll mark 2 inches upwards, and the back also is a bit roundish. I'll go ahead to connect. So after that, I'll be getting rid of the bulginess at the back of the dress, and I'll mark 1/2 inch from my waistline, extend it all the way up, and I'm also going to extend it down. So after I'm done doing this, I'll just go ahead to cut my pattern. So for this pattern, what we actually have at the thumbnail, the back was cut into 2, so you can go ahead to do that, or you just go ahead to sew out your dart. So with this, we have come to the end of today's tutorial. Please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and also join us in our next video. Thanks.